If you're interested in what I look like in real life and want to learn more about me, then follow my Instagram page at Joe the Insomniak. When I was very young, 6 or 7, I had an imaginary friend. His name was Scratch. He was a cat with a missing eye and a charcoal colour coat. I was a very anxious child. My mother said that it helped me cope while growing up. She said that she'd had a cat like that once, that she had been an anxious child also. I didn't care. It meant I had someone to chatter to. Scratch told me his name, but I never remembered him saying anything else. He would just stay paddling alongside me as I told him anything I could. It was a tough childhood, but my mother did what she could. She scraped by as a secretary and ate ramen while I had a few pieces of green on my plate. She always used to wear this cheap dollar store necklace, and as I grew older, I began to rationalize with how unappealing it looked. But she wore it so determinedly. She was the kind of woman to make the best out of a bad situation. Scratch came and went in my life, and I missed him, but I tried to make friends as best I could. I had a few friends at school, and although I wasn't one of the popular ones, people didn't pick on me. I was just there. Now when I was 12, I saw Scratch again. I told my mother carefully. She laughed and smiled, almost forced. "You were always an anxious child," she said, and that was the end of it. When I was about 16, he showed up again. He looked different, crouched in the tree outside my window. His arms and legs had elongated, and the whole of his eye was hollowed and bloodied. I told my mom over dinner. I was a bit concerned by this, trying to sound as unaffected as possible. She pushed her lips. Her hands were gripping the chair as she is sitting on it. I didn't know what to say and knew she didn't either. 18 or 19 was the third time Scratch come back. I was walking back from a party along a street alone. I know it's a stupid thing to do, but we lived in a safe town and I never had any trouble before. The street lamps flickered as I pulled my coat out and put it over me. Then, there he was. He's even bigger now, the blood pouring down his sides, deep fangs pushing out of his gums as he looks at me with his one eye. "Can you talk?" I whispered. I felt as though I was losing my mind. There was nothing but hair rustling through the tree branches and the electric crackle of the street lamps above. I turned. This can't be real. Then, a soft voice come from behind. "We have to play hide and seek." I whispered back. I don't want to play." I could barely speak. "I'm afraid." Scratch paused. "You do not have a choice. There's something hidden that I want you to find. Find it in a year." The wind curled its fingers around my neck. Scratch's last words drifted across the empty street. "Or you'll be sorry that you didn't." I turned. Nothing but tarmac and silence. I was still froze. I was frozen by fear, until the sharp buzz on my phone pierced the night. "Hello?" I answer, aching to hear a human voice. Is this Poppy Greenfield speaking? Speaking? Yes. I'm afraid you need to come down to Churchill Hospital immediately. Your mum has had an accident, leaving her in critical condition. I felt my blood thunder in my ears. It was a heart attack. Relatively uncommon in women her age. The doctors told me as I stood there lifelessly. I watched her die, but this is not before she wordlessly pressed her old dollar store necklace into my hand. It was blackened and dented from age, but I pressed it to my palm. No, I never forgot about what Scratch told me, but without my mum, I didn't care about consequences. What was anything worth besides her? The year went by in a blur, and I don't remember much of it. A few snapshots of me waking up in a strange bed with a splitting headache are all I have. I guess this is a strange kind of person grief can turn you into. Then I met Charlie and everything changed. I'd never met anyone who loved me so patiently and tirelessly. Within 6 months, I moved in. Within a year, I couldn't imagine living without him. Now, sometimes I would see Scratch and I'd feel as though I couldn't breathe, or I'd have a nasty fall the day after, but I accepted it as a strange coincidence. Maybe I was crazy. I told myself the night after I dreamed of him, I broke my foot. Maybe it didn't matter, as long as I can ignore it. One night, however, this changed. I wake up in a cold sweat. My cotton shirt stuck to me. The wind had blown the door open, and I could see into the living room, out to the garden. The double doors are open, swinging against their hinges, and I saw him. Scratch was huge. His long muzzle had cracked as it had grown and split the soft fur. His teeth were long and stained red. In bed next to me, Charlie started to convulse. His eyes shot open, milky white, gasping for air. "Please no," I said. "You didn't listen to me," Scratch said in a dark voice. "You didn't even try." "What do you want?" I cried. Charlie's breathing was shallowing. His eyes rolled back. His hand went cold. I stared at the cat, in its one eye, bloodied and mangled, staring back at me. "You have to find it now." It spoke in a deep rasp. It now turns and hunches down. It will not let me tell you where it is. I say, I don't know what your stupid game is or how to play it. I don't know what you want me to do or find. Scratch seems smaller now. His claws are broken and bent. The way he stood left his weight off a leg that I now saw as mangled as the rest of him. I squinted, trying to make out what the shimmer was behind him. I recoiled. Deep in the darkness of the trees were claws. Deep stretching, spindly black fingers reaching towards us. Scratch looked on, unblinking. "I gave it to your mother once." That's one green eye, glowing in the dark for a moment. "Please." He had barely uttered the words before the claws reached him, the darkness enveloping him. Staggering to my feet, a low moan came out from across the landing. I hear Charlie. The darkness shifted in one swaying motion, and I ran. My bare feet slipping against the floor. I made it into the bedroom and locked the door behind me, the darkness slamming against the wood. He had given it to my mother, she to me. I ran to the dresser, my heart hammering in my chest, and I threw it open. The bottom drawer, the necklace lay, and my hand scrambled over it, fumbling with the strap. The door flew open, and my breath left my body. I now have the necklace. Why is nothing happening? The creature standing in front of me was so huge and monstrous. I don't think I could find words to describe how big it was now. It's like looking back into a hole. I could feel the suffering of all the souls it's eaten. I gripped the necklace tight in my hands. My fingers slid over a small groove on the back of it. It has a secret panel. I cracked the necklace open, crying from fear. Inside is a phrase written in a strange language of which I cannot remember. All I remember is screaming it. Then, nothing but floating through a void. Seeing nothing, feeling nothing but quiet. I woke up in a hospital bed next to Charlie. The kind doctors told me that we'd been there a while because of a gas leak, and that we're lucky to be alive. They said it causes hallucinations and strange dreams. The words to tell them, however, couldn't come out of me. It was just not right. Then, the years went by. The memories grew dimmer as the happiness grew. We got married and moved away from the city. I felt like I finally had my life where I wanted it to be. It was a happy occasion when I found out I was pregnant with my daughter Julia. Almost forgotten, you see, except today, when I woke up. There's a cheap dollar store necklace on my front porch. When I woke up, my daughter, for her breakfast, she stretched and smiled and told me with bright optimism that she had a visitor in the night. An old beat up cat scratched and called her name until she'd listen, and they chatted. You're one anxious child. I felt my mouth form the words that were not mine. Something isn't right. I keep the dollar store necklace around my neck. It's all I can do. When Julia's around, I tell her it's my favourite in the world, and how it'll be hers someday. I've tried to write letters, but my hands won't form the words. I know that you'll never see this, but there's two things I'm certain of. The first thing's that, as long as I'm breathing, I'll always leave a bowl of milk outside for Scratch, no matter how much this may sound stupid. And second, you'll get this one day and understand.
Never would I have thought that I'd be writing one of these, but here I am, sitting at home in my dark room, typing my life away. My name is Robbie Wowers. I'm gonna save the introduction and not tell you about my life story, but how my world has changed on the 3rd of July 2017. I'm a lifeguard working at a public pool. I won't say where because that would narrow it down to 2 possible pools, and that information has to stay secret. I make decent money and have no complaints in life. It was the morning of the 3rd of July, the day before the 4th obviously. Unfortunately, it was the first Monday of the month, super chlorination. On super C days, we load up the pool with a lot of chlorine and let it do its thing. We also do in-services to brush up on our training and skills. Like any normal morning, I got up and did my routine before heading to work. When I walked in, everyone was already there. We always have our staff meetings before we go into the training stuff. After the staff meeting, I went to the bathroom. When I returned, I noticed everyone hovering around one of the girls, Sarah. I overheard someone say, "We're really gonna miss you. Just know you're doing a great thing." As soon as I walked in, everyone returned back to their seats and we started the training. There was something off. Everyone was treating Sarah like it was her last day. Her last day was supposed to be in August when the summer ended. While training, I felt like I was on the outside of a window looking in. Everyone spoke about past memories they had, specifically with Sarah. I used to just keep myself to myself, and I don't care. But my curiosity was burning up inside. Was she leaving? Why so soon? Where's she going? I did not say a word. After finishing up our CPR portion of the training, our supervisor, Vanessa, told us we did a good job and started to dismiss us. I was confused because we usually continue training with different scenarios. She was cutting this training session short. I didn't care. I was actually relieved that I got to enjoy the rest of my day. I said goodbye to everyone, and as I was walking out, Sarah stopped and gave me a hug. I found this really weird, because we were actually scheduled to work the next day's shift together. I hugged her back and went off with a confused look on my face. By far the weirdest day so far. At this point, it was 2 PM, and I had the rest of the day to relax and exercise. I drove home and decided to go for a run. After returning from what seemed like one of the best runs I'd had in a while, I decided to text one of my friends, and also a co-worker, Jeremy. At this moment, I noticed that my wallet was missing. I had left it back at the pool. The text I sent read, "Yo, wanna chill? I think I left my wallet in the pool. I'm about to go get it when we can grab a bite." I found it weird and very un-Jeremy-like, but he texts back within 10 seconds. The text read, "No, just get it tomorrow, bro. I can't chill tonight. Gotta study for this final." Another confusing moment. Finals weren't for another 3 weeks, and why doesn't he want me to go back to the pool? My curiosity was getting the best of me. I wouldn't have gone if I had some food at the house. I drove 20 minutes back to work. My weird day just got weirder. As I pulled up to the pool, I noticed the gates you could normally see through are blocked with what seemed like black tarp. I couldn't see inside at all. I pull up towards the parking lot and think, what on earth is happening? Everyone's car was still here. It was 6:30, we were dismissed at 2. I parked my car as far as possible and went all Nancy Drew in that place. I couldn't find an opening where I could peek in. I had a plan. A plan that would allow me to get a good look inside and hopefully not get caught. I very slowly walked to my car, grabbing my hip pack. Grabbing the keys from my pack, I made my way to the back of the entrance. It opened a door that led to the pump room, where it was dark and loud. I made my way towards the only light breaking into the room from the small square window in the door. I remember my stomach dropping to my feet when I looked through and found all my co-workers standing around the pool. They looked like they were just saying goodbye to Sarah. At this point, I didn't know what to think. I did not know what was going to happen next. I just knew that whatever it was, I wasn't invited. Not a care went through my mind. Why would I want to be back at work at 6 PM when I didn't have to? At this point, it seemed like I was the weirdo, spying on a couple of people through a small glass window. I wondered what they would say if they caught me. While staring at the group, I wondered, how much weirder can it really get? I spoke too soon. Vanessa was the last person to give her goodbyes. She gave Sarah a hug and kissed her on the forehead. I could not make out what they were saying, and I didn't want to open the door. They would definitely hear the sound of the pumps. They all proceeded to make a circle around Sarah. I noticed Jeremy reaching for something, and to my surprise, he pulls out what seemed to be a 6-inch knife from his pocket. He then moved the blade to his hand, cutting it open. At this moment, I mumbled under my breath, "What the hell? These people are crazy." He passed the blade around one by one. They cut their hands open too. All but one person, Sarah. She was in the middle of the circle. I will never forget the smile she had on her face. She genuinely looked happy, like it was her wedding day. Not even close. I've seen something like this while browsing the internet late at night. I didn't want to believe what was happening. I was hoping it was a dream. My eyes were peeled on Sarah and her happy expressions, which got creepy really fast. As expected, they all started to hold their bloody hands together, and it looked like a weird sacrificial ceremony. At this point, I was frozen, couldn't move at all. I should have taken my phone out. I should have recorded everything that was happening. I was paralysed. It only got worse. They were chanting something weird that I couldn't figure out. After 30 seconds of chanting, they stopped and started to take their clothes off. At this point, I should have left. I couldn't. I was frozen. They all jumped into the pool. Everyone but Sarah. I could see the blood colouring the pool around them. Sarah slowly started to slide into the water, joining them. She treaded water in the middle of the pool while they all held hands. After 10 seconds of chanting, I could tell that this was far more than what I was expecting. The eyes of everybody turned black. Everyone but Sarah. She looked normal at this point. I still couldn't take my eyes off them. I also didn't want to. Looking closer, I noticed that Sarah was the only one treading water. Everyone else was standing. They had no flotation, no arm movement, and no leg movement. How is this possible? I thought to myself. Nothing could prepare me for what happened next. Minutes passed, and they were still chanting in a circle. I sit here thinking to myself, what would have happened if I called the cops? What would happen if everyone knew what happened that day? I definitely did not want to be on the news. How about if there's others out there? They would definitely come find me. After what seemed like forever, I was staring through that window. They finally stopped chanting. I will never forget their blacked out eyes. Jeremy was turned facing towards me, and I could see his lips as he mouthed the words of "make the sacrifice." That's when the sacrifice took place. I won't go into details. I almost puked. I have never seen anything like this in my entire life. She was sacrificing her life. For what? She was dead. I couldn't believe my eyes. Immediately after Sarah took her own life, I ran out of the pump house. I didn't care to close the door behind me. I would soon later regret this. I ran as fast as I could to my car and drove off. While driving, I looked left and saw them carrying Sarah out of the water. I'm surprised I didn't get pulled over on my way home. When I got home, I went in my room and locked the door. I laid there for the next hour thinking about what the hell just happened. Before I knew it, I was asleep. I woke up the next day feeling great. It was one of those days when you wake up feeling refreshed. And I looked at my phone and saw a text from Jeremy. It reads, "Hey, sorry for ditching you yesterday. I really need to study. Can't fail another class." At that moment, I remembered everything that happened. It all came back to me like a ton of bricks hitting me over the head. I didn't want to get up or even move at all, but I had to go to work. I needed to pay my bills. Now, they didn't see me spying on them the day before. I could just acted like everything was normal, and that's exactly what I did. I came into work with a smile on my face, but burning on the inside. I got in early, and I could see who was working with me that day. Certainly not Sarah. She killed herself last evening. Or so I thought. My heart dropped to China as I saw her walking towards the facility like nothing ever happened. She was okay. Was it all a dream? Definitely not. It was all real. I remembered every single moment of that day. How the hell could I forget? She was definitely dead. I don't know how I did it, but I just acted as if everything was normal. Sarah walked in with Jeremy. "Great, I'm working with the creature of the undead and a Satan-worshipping lunatic." They both greeted me and we went on to do our morning opening duties. As the day went on, I tried to avoid Sarah at all costs, but I couldn't do it. It was weird. She certainly wasn't acting normal. She most definitely wasn't Sarah. Me and my husband moved into a house not that long ago, maybe a week or so. And ever since, odd things have been happening. It started the second day we were here. We started hearing and seeing strange things in the house. Hearing footsteps, doors and drawers opening and shutting, etc. We decided to ask the realtor about the house's history and if it had happened before. And like most realtors, she pretended that it has a perfect history. So we asked neighbours. Each one said the people who lived here were driven to insanity, and two of the neighbours said that they recalled seeing and hearing abnormal things on the property. One neighbour, if you count a wife and a husband as one neighbour, will describe the sounds and sight for us. I will never forget Julie and Richard's conversation with us about the happenings. There were screams, obviously those who lived there, and sometimes odd scratching noises, Richard said. We would see some type of being in the window. The last people to live here started to ask us for advice, but they didn't take our suggestions. Instead, they used demonic rituals to talk to it, though I don't know why they would have communicated with a demon purposefully. Julie had recounted before briskly changing the subject. I don't know why. After nudging the realtor a bit more, she mentioned how everyone who lived in the house went in normal, and had the same type of family and personality as us, she specifically mentioned, and came out insane or as dead bodies on stretchers being loaded into an ambulance with many cuts and scratches. Naturally, we were purely and truly horrified. Now I realise I am more than my husband. I say this because he's changed. He's different now. The difference started one night. We had a lot of opening and closing drawers and doors, and loads of footsteps. We woke up that night and screamed loudly, which must have been what the neighbours were talking about. I certainly woke up and tried to find out why he was screaming a scream that went on for an entire minute. But it wasn't an angry scream, a sad one indicating pain. Wasn't of a victim or enemy, but instead of no emotion. I've never heard such a long and emotionless scream. I tried to get him to stop, but he wouldn't. After a minute, it went on and he looked at me, with the same type of emotion as the scream carried. None. I could have sworn his eyes were the blankest I've ever seen them, like he wasn't really there, like he, Bobby himself, had gone. He acted like this for days, and he had the same nightly routine of screaming and then staring at me in silence. No matter how much it happened, I just couldn't get used to it. The longer it went on, the worse things became. Once I even woke up lying on the table. Another time he locked me in a room, all without reason or emotion. But one night it got worse. So much worse. He did his scream, then stared at me and went to bed like usual. And so did I. Only to be woken up 50 minutes later, being dragged by an invisible force to a closet. After 5 minutes in the closet, I heard Bobby, the real Bobby, scream his real scream of fear. I started to wonder what happened to him when the door, and I kid you not, broke off its hinges, as if someone threw it, flew right across the hall, hitting Bobby right in the middle of his head. That's when I brought my phone to type this and call 911, and ran straight to Richard and Julie's house. I'm staying there now, for the second night in a row typing this. Why am I typing this now? Because I was recounting it all in my head. What just happened? I'm house hunting again, hoping the next isn't haunted like this. Straight to Richard and Julie's house. I'm staying there now, for the second night in a row typing this. Why am I typing this now? Because I was recounting it all in my head. What just happened? I'm house hunting again, hoping the next isn't haunted like this. But if you have any idea that your house is haunted, leave immediately before it gets worse.
This incident happened to me last year on Halloween. My little brother and I were home alone, since our parents had gone out to a Halloween party. They tasked us with handing out candy to trick-or-treaters. This won my brother and I out because we had made plans to go trick-or-treating with a few friends. Our parents told us that we were too old to be still trick-or-treating, and that we could instead invite our friends over to hang out there. My friends declined my invitations because they still wanted to go out trick-or-treating, so that left me home alone with my brother handing out candy. A lot of people stopped by our home. By 10, almost all the candy was gone. My brother and I decided that we'd eat the rest. We were sitting on the couch, watching a movie, stuffing ourselves with candy, when there's a lock on the door. I storm off the couch, wondering who the hell could be knocking at our door this late. I assumed that it was just some late night trick-or-treaters. Even if that was the case, I had turned the porch light and Halloween decorations off, which should have been a dead giveaway that we're out of candy or that we're not home. So I assume it's my parents being cautious I look through the peephole, seeing a suspicious man standing on our porch. He's wearing a black hoodie with the hood over his head, making it difficult to see his face. The only detail of his face I could spot was that he had a beard and dry lips. There was no way that this guy was a trick-or-treater, because he wasn't wearing a costume and was far too old to be trick-or-treating alone. His hands were stuffed in the front pocket of his hoodie. He looks very thin. Every single red flag went off when I saw this guy. There's no way in hell I'm ever opening the door to him. Still looking through the peephole, I watch as he knocked on the door again. He seemed desperate for us to open the door and was shaking a bit. It wasn't even cold outside. Definitely not enough for someone to be trembling. He was giving me a bad vibe, and I wanted to get rid of him ASAP. "We're out of candy," I shout. I watch as a smile spread across his face. It wasn't a friendly smile either. "Are you in there alone?" the man said, almost in a mocking voice. "Should I call the police?" my little brother said to me quietly, gripping his cell phone. The man let out a low grumble. "Sounds like you're alone in there." I continue to watch him through the peephole. His hands are welded tightly in his pocket. He's now shaking a bit. I began to wonder if he's armed. I decided to go take action, speaking in the most intimidating voice I can. "Get away, or I'm calling the cops." His smile faded. His bare teeth show. They're yellow. I concluded that he's probably some homeless crackhead. He had a full plastery, fury look on his face. Fortunately, he left without trying to break in. Probably because he knew I wasn't messing around. I didn't stop watching through the peephole until I saw him completely off our property. My brother and I then breathed a sigh of relief and decided not to call the police. My brother and I were a bit paranoid after, watching TV until our parents came home. We didn't tell them about the man, since he hadn't really tried to harm us. Now when I think back to this, I wish we called the police, because maybe we would have been able to prevent a murder. You see, the next day, we found out that the elderly woman who lived a few houses down from us was brutally murdered. Her neighbour found her lying on her front porch covered in blood after being stabbed multiple times in the chest and neck. My brother and I immediately knew who did it and told the police what we could. They couldn't have got too much information from what we given, since we had not seen many details of his face. They went on the hunt for the man, but never caught him. I blame myself for that lady's murder, because I could have prevented it. I think the most disturbing thing of all is the fact that he didn't take anything from the house. He left the house untouched. He could have easily went in, taken whatever with the doors wide open. He only wanted to kill. That was his only intention. At the time, I lived with my parents, younger brother, older stepbrother and cousin in a big, foretold house that sat on a main street Behind it ran an alleyway flanked by apartments. It also had a huge yard that my basement bedroom looked out onto. We lived in a small town. Crime seemed minimal in the area, and I'd made my way out that Halloween night to make best and my favourite day of the year. It wasn't just what happened that night, though. It was, of course, what came after, and one small incident that came before. A few days before Halloween, my stepbrother and cousin arrived home to discover a pickup truck full of dudes taking photos of our home. Weird, but when approached, the man seemed really friendly, complimenting our Halloween setup. It was pretty great. That is true. The man sped off without incident and was quickly forgotten. My stepbrother and cousin re-entered the story Halloween night, the big event itself. At about 3 AM, both had been out drinking with their friends, and as such, both left their respective vehicles and braved the icy walk home on their own. My cousin arrived home first, but couldn't seem to get his keys in the lock, sitting on the porch waiting for the other to show up. He did, about half an hour later. After having a bit of a laugh at my cousin of being an uncoordinated idiot, he went to unlock the door himself. No luck. So they bit the bullet and called my mum, waking her up in the process. She, unimpressed, began opening the door for a pair of drunk idiots, and didn't buy their story about the wonky lock. They insisted, though, and to shut them up, she finally relented and tried her key. She too could not get her key in the lock. Annoyed, tired, confused, she wrote it off as a problem for tomorrow, and the three of them hit their retrospective hay. One other person arrived home that night, me, though I arrived much earlier than those two, and was in bed by about midnight. I woke up close to 1 AM, still tired. All I could feel was anxiety, and I didn't know why. At first I tried to tell myself that I'd just gotten a bit too into the holiday spirit, psyching myself out, but then I noticed a shadow. It was perfectly man-shaped and cast upon my window. I turned on my bedside lamp, blinked. It's gone. It wasn't unusual, mind you, to see shadows of people harmlessly walking through the alley. That's what I thought at the time. Then there's what happened after. I came home from school the next day. My parents were there. So was the locksmith and the police. My parents were there because that's where they'd lived. The locksmith was there because my mum called him in. As the confusion over who broke the lock persisted, the cops were there because the locksmith and my parents had called them. When the locksmith proceeded to pull a knife out of the ground and the tip of a broken key in our lock, it's a look on my mum's face I'll never forget. The screens on our windows had also been slashed too. When I was 13, my best friend Lisa lived in a very rural, woodsy area. There wasn't a lot to do, but it was a blast to explore in full. Maybe a 15 or 20-minute walk away, which was relatively short by golf cart, our primary means of travel. Now, there was this old, rotting house that had been uninhabited since before either of us were born. My mum's friend knew the guy who used to live there, just an elderly man who passed away, either from heart attack or old age, or something completely not scary. But the house is run down, filled with holes, having broken windows, and a spooky basement that was never completely emptied out. So it was fun for us 13-year-olds to get into and explore. We would tell scary stories and try to find ghosts or whatever. So one day around Halloween, we take the golf cart and drive down the house to do some exploring and creep ourselves out. We turn down the long driveway to the home, parking off to the side of the home, on the off chance if anyone came down, they wouldn't see us there. So we're trying to get all of our gear together. We'd often take backpacks and cameras with us when exploring. When Lisa suddenly stops talking, I look up to see what she's doing, realizing she was staring at a guy standing in the doorway watching us. He looks maybe 5 or so years older than we are, pretty normal looking, but smiling. It's not like we've never seen other people at the home. The occasional other groups of teens running around is normal, but this is the first time I remembered feeling so uncomfortable. We both had our attention as he calls out, "There's a party in the basement, it's $5 to get in." I was like, the hell? There's no cars around, no kids lingering outside, no noise, no indication that anyone else was there but us. Also, the basement was dark and trashed and smelled terrible. I had been in there before. There was absolutely no way a party would be feasible. Lisa said something along the lines of, "That's fine, we're just leaving," and the guy responds, "I was just kidding, it's free to get in. How old are you?" I have no idea why, but Lisa got out the cart and started walking to the door. I was like, hell no, I'm good right here. Now she looked as though she was trying to see inside the door without getting too close, but he was leaning in the doorway. I was still sitting in the cart like, "Lisa, let's go." But they're both ignoring me. Then I noticed somebody in the window directly in front of the cart, not even trying to be discreet, with their fingers on their lips like they're telling me to be quiet. Then the guy in the window starts dancing. He was swaying and chomping his teeth. It's the most weird thing I've ever seen to this day. So I yell, "Lisa, I have to pee. We need to go or I'm leaving because I have to pee." And I guess she sensed my urgency because she stops talking to the guy in the door, walking back to the cart. She then tells the guy that We'll be back in 15 minutes and wave goodbye. The window person stops dancing when Lisa walks back to the cart and was now looking towards the door at his friend. I'm happy to say that we arrived safely home, but I freely admit that I was crying my eyes out trying to explain what I saw. I told her that I was never ever going back there again. I'm 13 now, so this happened 5 years ago when I was 8. It was Halloween, and every year we got to my grandparents' house. My uncle, who was 14, was taking me and some of my cousins trick-or-treating. It was dark, but there were people outside waiting on the firework display. We trick-or-treated here every year, so we know the neighborhood. Everything was going normal, but I was older this year and wanted more candy, so we decided to go to another neighborhood we never went before. We first went to this old couple's house and were joking around. My uncle was chasing us and I fell. My knee started bleeding. I thought there's a lot of blood, but I was 8, so probably being dramatic. So I wanted to go back to my grandparents' house to get a band-aid. My uncle was going to take everyone back with me, but I had told him that it wasn't that far. I can just go back. And I'm the oldest cousin there, so I didn't want to be treated like a baby. When I turned around the corner of the street, there was a man walking alone, coming towards me. He appears pretty normal, so I'm not really scared by him. He stopped in front of me. Now immediately I can tell that something's off about this. He said, "What am I doing out here alone?" seeming friendly. I told him I was going back to my grandma's because I cut my knee from trick-or-treating. He said his home was right down the street. He could fix me up easily in a couple of minutes, and I could go back to trick-or-treating again. I thought this was a good idea because my mum and dad might not let me out again if they knew we were messing around and I got hurt. So I was stupid and decided to go with him. When we got back to his home, he got me a drink and a band-aid, and I was sitting on the couch. He came and sat really close to me, and I started to get scared because he was acting weird now, not talking much. He put his hand on my leg and started moving it around. I just jumped up and went to run out, but he grabs my arm and pulls me back hard. I started crying, telling him to let me go, but he just started acting friendly again, asking why I wanted to leave already. I didn't know what to do and sort of just froze. Just stayed there because there was nothing else I could do really. Now time passed, and I guess I was there longer than I thought, because I heard my uncle shouting my name from the street, so he must have gone back to my grandparents' house and realised I wasn't there. The windows were open, so it's pretty loud. I jumped up again, and the man saw my reaction and realised it was someone looking for me. I ran out the door this time. I told my uncle, and we both ran back to my grandparents' house, and my dad called the police. I was too young then, so my parents didn't tell me that the guy was actually a registered sex offender. This happened in 2001. I was 7. Now my mum helped me remember this one. It was freezing, probably within the 20 to 30 degree range. I was hell-bent on going out anyway. Now I wanted my pillowcase to be full of sweets. I got dressed as a cat, not too hard to imagine. Now at the time, I had zero idea, but my rockstar mum was on it. My mum noticed a very tall man dressed in black. My mum said he had jeans on, a black trench coat and a black hockey mask. He had no kids with him, so that's a huge red flag. But he did have a pumpkin basket to put candy in. He followed us around, house to house. Always stayed back 3 or 4 houses according to my mum. After 20 minutes or so, she shrugged it off, thinking that it was just some really tall kid trick-or-treating. But the more she said she kept shrugging it off, the more uneasy she felt. Now I do remember my pillowcase was only half full, and my mum hurrying us home, me being super annoyed about it. I do not, however, remember my mum putting the house on lockdown after we got in the front door. I ate some candy and went to bed. My mum lays next to me. Now, this is where my mum really helped me out with the story, as I have no idea of what happened at the time. Fast forward to the following morning. There was a pumpkin basket full of candy with a note that said meow in chicken scratch on our front porch right outside of the front door. My mum threw out the candy in case it is tampered with and burned up the note. Now that creeps me out, but what's more creepy is that she woke up in the middle of the night to go and recheck the home, looked out the window and saw him in our front lawn, staring at the home with the pumpkin basket in his hand. She didn't think that he notices her. She called the police immediately, briefs the officer on what happened. The officer said he'd do a few rounds and patrol the area. My mum never heard back from the officer that night. I live in northern Maine, and there's a lot of scary stuff that happens up there. About 150 years ago, there was a serial killer who was a Canadian man by the name of Jim Collins. He was lynched by a mob of people, and they hated him so much, everybody stuck pins in his body after he was hung. They then went on to bury him in the swamp, which is a 40-minute walk from my home. So, I was 12 years old when I went hiking out in the forest with my brother. We eventually came across this extremely old shack. Never seen it before, and we always played down in the forest. And not knowing the stories, and being quite innocent, we simply go inside. The building was probably 9 foot by 9 foot. Inside, there's a lot of old axes that were just rusting. Everything's covered in moss, but there were dead dogs and cats all over the place, clearly murdered and dissected. Kind of getting sick again thinking about it. Anyway, all of a sudden, we hear knocking from underneath us, and we hear what sounded like run. Being young, we panic and freak out, running as fast as our legs would let us go back home. Got back to our home and told our parents what we found. Now it truly bothered my dad, so he contacted the police to figure out what was going on in there. When the police showed up shortly after, they caught a bunch of satanic people performing a ritual. Apparently, it was a place where the satanic group, being mostly 20 and 30-year-olds, went to sacrifice animals because they feel the evil energy the man had who died there. What's crazy is I found out as I got older, the last person Jim Collins ever murdered, he killed with an axe only after he yelled at the guy across the street while slapping him on the floor. Apparently, there were police officers too, with the sheriff and deputy. The deputy was the one who got away, running through the exact same forest. Apparently, the group who was performing the rituals only got there less than 10 minutes after we left. Definitely the most terrifying incident of my life. General staff would rotate the camp for the first 6 weeks, until they found a team you worked really well with. One of those teams was the sanitation and maintenance team, cleaning the bunks, mess around halls and bathrooms, as well as doing any handyman repair work. That was the name of the game. Now story 1. This takes place in the camp, deep in the woods. The sanitation/maintenance team also happened to be in charge of the lockers. That's a confiscation locker that doesn't have an entry log, so we're constantly partying on the campers' weed and booze. One night after a camp loaded out, we're starting the rounds, the deep clean, going room to room and mucking out trash, picking up food, fixing clogged drains. Now we're nearing the last couple of cabins when we realise something was moving around inside the cabin we're about to enter. We go around the corner, peeking through a window, and saw that the window on the opposite wall had been left open, and a young bear had ripped through the screen, happily making a meal out of leftover potatoes, trail mix, and other assorted junk. So we noped out of there, radioed the rangers from our truck, moved on to the next cabin. So the next day saw the start of repairing the bear damage project to the cabin. A bunk bed was rebuilt, new window screen, new doorknob for the interior, lots of stuff like that. A lot goes wrong when a bear is locked in a room for a few hours trying to get out. Now the second story happened months later, after I'd been assigned to program staff. This meant I was part of the team who ran camp activities, everything from the boathouse to the rope courses to the off-road jeep tours. I loved it. One day, during a week hiatus for campers, some of us program staff decided to take the jeeps out. Now we went through the east part of the camp, explored Kings Canyon, working our way back to the ridge, and we're making our way back to the camp when A call comes in on the radio. The rangers are in the process of trying to capture and relocate a mountain lion that was a bit too curious about the camp for our liking and enjoyed drinking from the lake off dock. Apparently, they're up on the ridge, conveniently near the road we needed to get back to camp. So we move on. We get to the last bend and come around to see a scene that would be one straight out of a movie. Apparently one of the rangers got too close. The cat got spooked and aggressive, and right in front of us, one of the rangers had to put a bullet into the poor creature. Our whole convoy was just froze. What did we just see? We're shocked. None of us knew what to do, so one by one, as one of the park rangers waved, we said goodbye. When I was around 12 years old, I spent the afternoon at a friend's house who I knew from school. He lived in a neighbourhood that I was not at all familiar with, so when we decided to take our bikes out for a ride, I simply followed him until we came to a large wooded area. It was in a valley that descended away from the roadside, and from what I could see, become rather dense and overgrown, because all the foliage we decided to go through when we left our bikes. We had been hiking for about 30 minutes when we realised that we could no longer see the spot that we left our bikes at, surrounded on all sides by thick vegetation. We thought it was fantastic, continuing deep into the valley. At some point, we came across what looked like an abandoned campsite. There's old cans lying around, looking like they're being used to boil water, an old ashtray pit, a lot of plastic sheeting. We had a look around, but didn't really find anything interesting carrying on. Now just as we're leaving, somebody called out to us from somewhere on the other side of the camp. A homeless man appears, no doubt the camp dweller, and demanded to know what we're doing with his stuff. We explained that we did not take anything and are just looking around as he calms down. We made polite conversation for a few minutes, exchanged names, and a vague idea of where we'd come from. At this point, we didn't feel like we were in danger and the homeless guy was actually friendly. We decided to get through and said our goodbyes, but he told us that we have to give him something. We have not brought any food or water with us, so didn't have anything for him, and he took exception of this. He then starts yelling at us, demanding our shoes, which neither of us are going to part with. We started to back away from him at the same time and figure out which way he had come from, when all of a sudden he pulls out a knife, lunging towards us. I don't remember exactly which way he went or how far he had us run, but I'm full of adrenaline. I look back a couple of times, realizing that we're getting away, but he's not letting up. There's also no tree cover at this point. We reached the side of the road where we left our bikes, unfortunately had enough of a lead on him so we could hop on and pedal. We saw a couple of builders who were offloading materials up the road, seeing we're panicked, stopping us to find out what's going on. We give a brief description of events, and they went back to see if he was still there, but apparently there was no sign of him. Cast your minds back to a time when you're 18, out of A levels, and looking forward to dealing with life. Like so many of my peers, I got it into my head that I wanted to go abroad and do development work. I found an organisation via a newspaper advert, signed up at the recruitment weekend in Hull, and then, straight after my last exam, jetted off to Denmark to train, to do what I wanted for 6 months. The basic idea was that I would train in Denmark, then head out to Africa to do stuff like building toilets, educating people, etc. Well, the first mistake happened when I arrived. That is, they forgot when I was meant to be there, so I sat in the bloody airport for 3 hours before thinking, screw it, and I then got a taxi to where I was staying, making sure I charged it to the company. Anyway, about a month in, we were all about to clear up some school. Myself and a friend went working on the library, and I happened upon a book with a very interesting title. The History of North Korea. I read it, had a laugh at was essentially some very weak propaganda from our friends in Asia, and then I threw it out, thinking nothing of it. Another interesting occurrence was when the school decided to have a sing-along session. Fine and dandy, but we decided not to go out because we had our own plans of work to do, mainly lounging around and doing nothing. One of the teachers basically busted in, orders us out. Now she seemed very put off by me staying there. I don't think she was equipped to deal with an English teenager who wasn't in the mood to put up with crap. The final straw came when I found a website called TV in Alert and noticed several odd things about this supposed charity I signed up with. First of all, there had recently been a police raid at their headquarters. Secondly, there are allegations of money laundering, tax evasion, false accounting, brainwashing, and gun running. Not forgetting wage slavery. So, not liking what I was reading, I emailed the link to my dad, who's a journalist at the time. He emailed back saying, "It's real, get out of there." Anyway, I started to email the creator of the website in order to formulate an escape plan. The only problem was, what was meant to be a private email was posted on the website, which was monitored by the lovely people I was working with. Here's where the story gets interesting. We were just about to go onward, outbound for the weekend, when I was pulled off the bus regarding the email that I had sent. I was put in an office on my own with a large, angry Danish man. He couldn't understand why I was not afraid of him. Could have been something to do with the knife that I had on me. So after an hour of him sort of trying to intimidate me, looking stupid, he tells me leave. Here's the fun part. I get in contact with my mum over MSN, and she actually phoned up this guy threatening him with coming over to go and make his life very difficult. Now, I got on the plane the same day, and I contacted the media about this. As a postscript to this, the leader of the cult is now on trial. The place I stayed is closed. The whole organization went under. My parents were part of a fake cult. Now there was a man that used to lead group chants and things, and one time while everyone's eyes were closed, chanting away in the darkness, me and him lock eyes, and he realized that I was laughing at how dumb it was. Since then, he had a vendetta against me. He turned my parents against me first, convincing them that one day in the future, I'ma break their hearts, destroying the family, because they were so invested in him, they stopped believing him, treating me that way. After this, he made my parents focus on my older brother more than me, lavishing him with expensive gifts like Gucci watches, a brand new Jeep with a private plate. This is before he even passes his driving test. And experiences like executive box seats at major sports events and whatnot. This wasn't enough. After this, he convinced all of his followers that I was mentally handicapped, needing to be kept in isolation. For most of my teenage years, I would come back from school, college, university to an empty home, many times not seeing another soul for weeks. The story of my parents' retarded child spread through the entire community, where it's now accepted as fact. I can't get married because everyone assumes I'm disabled. After this, he bankrupted my parents and family, making them pay all of his bills and expenses, rewarding them with prayers. Through a too complicated to go into detail chain of events, I was given the responsibility to become a full-time parent to my 2-year-old cousin. So he convinced everyone that I was doing weird things with her, and I could not be left alone with her. He convinces my parents that I was their enemy, his sons were their real sons, and to ignore my existence. Now to this day in my life, I have never once been able to have a heart-to-heart talk with either of my parents. I've been working for 6 years now. They don't even know the name of my boss or team or what I even do. Their only interest is on what day I get paid. There has been more done to me than this short amount, but I just replied because I wanted to say that I'm a better man than anyone's ever understood. I forgive my parents now because that guy has been dragged to hell, finally. I forgive them not because they deserve it, but because I believe the experience made me a stronger person. If all this could not break me, what can? The most disturbing thing about this cult was firstly that there are a million holy men like this all over the world. The second most disturbing thing is how easy it is for them to gather followers who believe them that they have divine intervention. Though nothing is more cheap and disgusting in this world. If anyone reading this is going through similar events, I will say that your family is ill. If they were of a sound mind, they would not be doing them things. Be kind, be good, be better than them. When I was 15-ish, my best friend and I essentially broke into a bunch of abandoned houses and stole stuff. However, it was okay because he said it as urban scavenging or something like that. Totally not stealing. Anyway, during this time, we found two houses that were unsettling to say the least. The first house. This one was right down the road from where my best friend, we'll call him Tay, lived. So we knew it had been empty for at least a year. Grass and weeds grown up from inside. The back door led into the living area, which was fully furnished. Okay, so weird, but whatever. We keep on going. Full furniture sets. The entire house is fully furnished. Washer, dryer, with all of the detergent stain removal stuff everywhere. A full china cabinet, a table with plates of rotten food on it, pots on the stove, food still in them. We didn't open the fridge. I'm getting sufficiently creeped out by now. It's really cool, and Tay, he's already taken in his mental inventory of what he wants to take. And we continue. The house is laid out. Back door, living area, utility room, kitchen, hallway. The hallway has two doors on the right, one on the left, one straight ahead. That's the entire home. So we decide to explore the rooms. All the doors are closed, so with our hearts pounding, expecting a demon or boogeyman to jump out as soon as we open the door, we try the first one to our right. The doorknob will turn, but the door won't open, so we move past it to the second door on the right. It's a master bedroom, fully furnished. The bed sheets are pulled off on the floor beside the bed. It's pretty messy, but everything looks like it's still there. We end up getting something like $15 in change off the dresser, which was besides the keys for work out the back. But Tay definitely was, and wants to check under the mattress for valuables. He lifts a mattress and is shining his flashlight under when he calls for me. "What is it?" I said. So I walk over to investigate with him. On the underside of the mattress is a fairly large brown stain. I, of course, am not trying to scare myself in the dark. It's a scary home, so I make up some crap about a woman having a baby on it. I don't know. There's nothing else good in that room, so we move on to the end of the hallway. It's a kid's room, a toddler by the size of the bed. This bed did not have any sheets and was fairly empty. It's just a bed frame and mattress, but there were still clothes hanging in the closet. The ceiling was hanging down halfway into the room, so we didn't actually explore it. I could not tell the gender of the child, so we move on to the next room, the one that was on our left initially. It's a bathroom. It has the curtains, towels, toiletries on the counter. Besides the sink is a #1 dad charm. Just a pendant, not the chain. Turns out it's 24 karat gold. Now I'm just realizing that we haven't even pulled the shower curtain back. We do nothing there. It's boring. Now, we have the room that we didn't go to the first time, but it won't open. We eventually come back to the door. Tay says screw it, ramming his shoulder into it until it opens. We noticed immediately how much darker this room is, more dark than all the others, and we shine our lights around. We realize it's because the window is boarded up. That's the only room in the house that has a boarded window. Whatever though. Maybe this window got broke. So we take a look around and see some boxes looking like clothes and random stuff just tossed around on the floor. There's a super nice mirror. It's solid wood, painstakingly carved and etched, hella heavy, just laying on the floor. Trey grabs it to take with us and we turn to leave. That's when I noticed why the door wouldn't open immediately, even though it wasn't locked. There's 4 nails which have been hammered in at an angle. Weird, right? So we leave, and eventually Tay goes back. He goes to get his goodies, and that's when it hits me. The door was nailed shut from the inside. The window's been boarded up from the inside, but how? While retrieving stuff, he got some copper, vases, bottles made out of glass milk, and sold a lot of it, keeping some. He ended up keeping the mirror, hanging it in his bedroom until he took it down due to weird stuff happening. So it's hung up in his bedroom. Flash forward a few days later, he's having nightmares, not feeling well, terrified. Just has a feeling of dread constantly. I would go over to his home and would feel uneasy in his bedroom. That was my second home and I've never felt uncomfortable there. I always played it off, but the atmosphere felt different. He starts waking up with scratches that weren't there when he fell asleep. Not elaborate, like claw marks and stuff. Really weird. Mostly on his neck and down his face once. He becomes frightened with the mirror putting it in the closet, double checking that it's closed. The following morning, it's open. He pulls out the mirror, turns it to face me, and notices that his name has been carved into the back, with his birth year underneath. How you'd sign artwork. After that, he gets rid of it. The weird stuff stopped happening. I went to an abandoned hospital. There was a large square staircase spiraling up to the roof of the outside of the building. Locked steel door at the bottom, so the only way up was to climb outside onto the first landing. My body boosts me up. I climb over, and there's a sleeping bag with a steak knife next to it on the landing. I call down, we're definitely not alone here, dude." "No, it's cool," says a voice behind me, scaring the life out of me, causing me to jump and whirl around. There's these young, dirty, homeless looking guys standing there, coming down the stairs from above, hands up and palms out. "Didn't mean to scare you," one says, as he takes a seat on the stairs. So I carefully step on the handle with the knife, leaning over the edge to pull my friend up. We had planned to sit on the roof and drink beer, so we offer them some beers, which they accept. We're talking about the city, the cops, travelling, and life in general. Being in town for a week or so for just guy things. He then says, "You're human, right?" I hate it. I mean hate it when I meet people that end up being aliens. You never know until you peel their skin off. They've been after me for a long time, you know. They never stop. I think I should just kill everyone to be safe. He's definitely not joking. There's an uncomfortable silence as my friend and I realize this guy's crazy. "Yeah man, we're human. Just wanted to check out the place and drink some beer. We're gonna go head away now and move on. Definitely don't want any trouble." He just stares in silence, so we leave him the last beer, carefully backing up to the railing, jumping down and walking away very quickly, constantly looking back over our shoulders the entire time. They're just standing there silent watching us. The place is still abandoned 5 years later, and we've never been back. I'm not a believer in supernatural, but God, I don't know what to think of this situation that happened. Not really creepy, I guess, but a mystery from my childhood that I still occasionally think about. There used to be a home that was abandoned, 2 houses down from my friends. Nobody really knew much about the people who lived there. They never went outside, never mowed their lawn, never had a car that anyone saw. I don't know how he found out they left, but one day my friend asked, "Do you want to go inside? Because they've moved, and the side garage door is left open." Saying they moved would be an overstatement. Just up, and left is more appropriate. Inside the garage, the floor's covered in clothes and children's toys. We walk in the home, enter through the kitchen. There's still dinner out. A half-eaten sandwich on one plate. Salad on another. An empty plate with crumbs on it, with a gallon of tea sitting on the counter. Doesn't sound bad. The fridge and freezer are still full and gathering bugs. The living room is empty besides an air mattress. The upstairs has 3 empty rooms, aside from clothes on the ground, with a baby crib in one of them. There was a basement too, but we were 10, scared out of our mind to go down there, and never did. The house was well known over the years, and no one ever locked the side garage door. It was vandalized. We would occasionally go in there when bored, until I was no longer friends with that guy. But as 4 years passed, that nasty sandwich, now just a glob, still sits there. I still wonder who those people were who lived there, and what caused them to completely abandon their lives in the middle of dinner one night. When I was 14, my family went on a camping trip. The group consisted of my parents, grandparents, and 12-year-old sister, and my 7-year-old cousin. My cousin was getting pretty bored of campfires, as a kid does, so we decided to walk to a park a couple of streets over. We were parked in a campground, as opposed to out in the woods. So this park was accessible and in the sight of the majority of campers. It was a good 5 minutes walk from our site through, far enough from the forest that our parents wouldn't be able to hear or really see anything that was happening. We sat on the swings for 5 to 10 minutes before a girl around my age walks over. I saw her coming because her tent was directly across from the park. She sat on the swing besides me and started talking, asking me where we camped, how long we'll be here for, what music I liked, etc. She kept her head down the whole time, making eye contact probably 3 times, seeming distracted and possibly sad. So I smiled, tried to make friends. Unfortunately, that wasn't her plan. About 10 minutes into our conversation, she said goodbye, heading back to her tent. Not 10 minutes had passed before a man in his mid-20s stepped out after her and proceeded to walk towards me with a huge grin on his face. He must have been her brother. Now, my first reaction was to assume he's mentally handicapped. Why would an older man be smiling at me this way? I give him a smile, trying to look away, but he was barreling down the street towards me, refusing to break eye contact. When he reaches me, he said hey, saying how old I am, and that I looked about 15, what my name was, etc. I responded politely as a naive teenager would, and my sister and cousin stared at him. They were obviously freaked out, but didn't know what to do. He then said, "Do I like Justin Bieber?" Even though I wanted to support our fellow Chanka artist, I said no. He said, "Do I like One Direction?" I said they're okay. He then said, "Do I want tickets?" At this point, me and my sister and cousin, although so young, knew something bad was about to happen. They took off sprinting towards our trailer, and I started standing up, getting ready to leave. I said no. I didn't want tickets. I felt squeamish, as though I had a feeling what he asked wasn't for money. Now, the thing that made it even worse was I was 14 but appeared to be 11. It's obvious I haven't got any cash on me. And there was no way in hell he wanted me to go ask my parents for some. He persisted listening to all kinds of artists. I began walking away at this point and told him no, I was not interested. I got scared that he was going to follow me, but thankfully he didn't, and I was able to walk home at a normal pace. When I got there, my cousin was crying while my sister was trying to explain what was going on. I tried to calm them down and told everyone what had happened. Again, as a naive child, I started pushing down my feelings of danger, forcing myself to believe he is only selling tickets. I hate the fact that he's still out there somewhere. When I was 18, I was going through some problems and very depressed and lonely. It felt like I had literally no way to meet new friends or anything, and I was a loss in life. I used to walk through the forest to try and clear my head sometimes, and there's one experience that happened to me when I did so that I'm never gonna forget. It was foggy this day, and I was walking through smoking. I thought it was funny because I couldn't really see the smoke through the fog. It was that thick. This was during the winter months, I should mention. As I was walking, I saw a yellow glow of light in front of me. I was very confused by this. Now at the same time I could hear children laughing. I thought this was odd, because it seemed to be coming from all around me. I said, "Hey, are you with your parent?" I heard laughing, then saw this yellow glow that I could now see was a raincoat running off into the distance. I might have been worried, but that didn't mean I didn't care, so I sprinted off after her, saying, "Hey, you've got to stop, this is dangerous." It was very hard to walk through the forest because of just how bad the fog was, and the fact that I couldn't really see what was in front of me too well. She seemed to just disappear in the fog at one point and fall down. I sprinted over, and what I found was the most scary thing of my life. There was no girl, just an old raincoat that had appeared to be there for at least 30 years, absolutely tattered and covered. I looked around everywhere, then realised this was no normal girl. I don't know if I walked into some kind of memory from a spirit or what, but it'll still haunt me to this day. And yes, I did call the authorities, and there was a large manhunt, and no one was ever found. What's more creepy, there were no cars in the car park other than my own, so it had to only be me there.